I never expected my parents to corner me without raising their voices, without slamming doors, without even a hint of guilt. They simply sat across from me, calm, almost serene, and told me my rent would increase unless I agreed to care for my sister's children, without pay, every evening for 4 hours and 2 full weekends each month. They called it helping family. I called it coercion wrapped in politeness. Most people crumble when trapped by their own parents. Me? Something deep inside stiffened, cold, final. They assumed I'd cave as I always had. They had no idea I had already begun planning my escape or the truth I had uncovered the night before. My name is Chloe Bennett. For years, I believed I had carved out enough distance from my family to breathe freely. Not escape completely, but just enough to make choices that were truly my own. 6 years ago, I moved into a modest apartment my parents owned in suburban Connecticut. Practical, affordable, close to work, and finally mine. I furnished it slowly, deliberately. A reading chair by the window, a soft rug, a mirror. I found at a weekend market, all pieces chosen as if each item was a tiny declaration of independence. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Or so I thought. Growing up, my family projected warmth. The holiday photos on the hallway walls, the matching Christmas sweaters, the carefully curated images of togetherness, they all suggested a functional, loving household. My mother obsessed over tradition, always insisting that family came first, even if it was inconvenient. Beneath that polished surface, there was an unspoken hierarchy. Serena, my older sister, was the center of gravity, the one who needed attention, support, guidance. When she married Ethan and had 3 children, Ruby, Liam, and Ellie, the entire household seemed to orbit her life. I never resented Serena. Not really. I had learned early that in our family, I was the reliable one, the one expected to adjust, to compromise, to absorb. If Serena needed help, I gave it. If my parents asked a favor, I rearranged my life to comply. Boundaries that made me uncomfortable, I swallowed them whole. It was easier than confrontation. But eventually, swallowing too much left something lodged in my throat. In the weeks leading up to the meeting, I noticed subtle signs. My mother's messages carried an unusual urgency, her casual remarks loaded with reminders of family responsibility. Serena's voice was thin and strained, a constant undertone of exhaustion from sleepless nights and Ethan's frequent work trips. I didn't suspect that my family was planning to drag me back into a life I had spent years distancing myself from. My job, ordinary by many standards but hard-earned by mine, finally felt stable. I'd navigated long hours demanding clients and endless reports to become a financial analyst I could be proud of. I wasn't rich, but I had independence, structure, a life built on my own terms. It mattered more than anything, so when an email arrived, subject line, family meeting, mandatory, I assumed it was another of my mother's melodramatic orchestrations, like the time we spent 45 minutes debating kitchen cabinet colors. I had no idea I was walking into a trap that threatened everything I had built. As I stepped into my parents' living room, unease prickled along my spine. My father paced near the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, the posture of someone preparing to deliver unwelcome news. My mother perched on the couch, perfectly upright, her expression tight. Serena sat in an armchair, twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit dating back to high school. "You're late," my mother said the moment I entered. "It's 11:58. The meeting was at noon," I replied. She ignored me, as if time itself owed her obedience. My father motioned toward the love seat. "Sit. We need to talk." The room weighed on me, heavy and suffocating. I placed my purse down, bracing for whatever performance awaited. Serena avoided my gaze. The first red flag. "Your sister needs help," my mother said sharply. "I'm drowning, Chloe," Serena whispered, her voice tight with fatigue. "Keith's away constantly. The kids. It's overwhelming." I nodded slowly. "Okay, what kind of help?" As my father spoke, the words hit me with the subtle force of a sledgehammer. "As a family, we support each other. Your mother and I believe the best solution is for you to take on responsibility for your nieces and nephew." "Responsibility?" I echoed, my voice steady despite the shock. My mother unfolded a sheet of paper, sliding it across the coffee table. She spoke like a judge delivering a verdict. The schedule was precise. Pick up Ruby at 3:15, Liam at 3:30, supervise homework, prepare dinner, stay until Ethan returns, usually around 7. Plus, 2 full weekends a month. I swallowed dryly. You want me to babysit every evening? We call it helping family, my father corrected, his tone firm. I work until 6 most days, I said cautiously. Adjust, he replied. Your career shouldn't come before family. There it was, the quiet dismissal of everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed. I asked in a small voice, and if I don't adjust? A practiced glance between my parents, a calm but deadly unspoken threat. My mother folded her hands. Then we'll need to reconsider your rent. $800 is below market. Refusal to help will result in an increase to fair value. I froze. You're threatening my rent unless I care for my sister's children? My mother didn't flinch. We're asking you to contribute. If you won't, yes, the rent reflects market rate. Serena finally looked up, eyes pleading. I really need you. Something inside me snapped. Not a scream, not a dramatic collapse, but a quiet, sharp, irreversible pull. I need time to think, I said, standing. We need an answer today, my father said, his patience thin. You'll have it, I replied, walking out. But the answer wouldn't be theirs. Back in my apartment, I let the silence settle over me. My parents' calm certainty echoed in my mind like a threat. I stared at my living room, the chair by the window, the rug, the mirror catching the late afternoon light, all carefully chosen, all once mine. Now I realized they were tools, leverage to manipulate, not comfort. I pulled out my lease, reading every line deliberately. Panic shifted to clarity. They couldn't raise the rent immediately. Maximum increases were capped. 90 days notice required. Their threats were bluffs. Anger sharpened into focus, cold and precise. I opened my laptop searching for apartments. By morning, I had scheduled tours. And by Wednesday, I found a renovated industrial apartment, 20 minutes away with tall windows, exposed brick, a space untouched by expectation. I applied immediately, and approval came by Thursday. That night, I packed quietly, methodically, room by room, folding clothes, wrapping dishes, labeling boxes. My apartment became a half-empty shell. Each item packed a reclamation of something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Friday, I drafted my 60-day notice, signed, certified mail, no emotion. Saturday, movers arrived. Rain tapped against windows as they carried my life out, leaving behind an apartment stripped of any leverage. I slid the keys through the mail slot and walked away. By the time my parents discovered the empty apartment, I was gone. My phone lit up with missed calls and voicemails. I didn't listen. I blocked their numbers. The silence was mine. The quiet in my new apartment wasn't peaceful at first. It was unfamiliar, tense in its neutrality. No one was calling, texting, or messaging demands. No urgent voices reminding me of family obligations. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting patterns on the exposed brick walls. The space smelled faintly of new paint and promise. I had reclaimed my corner of the world. But freedom has a way of drawing attention. Within days, a certified letter arrived at my office. My chest tightened as I tore it open, expecting threats, perhaps legal intimidation. And there it was, a demand to return home to discuss family obligations, accompanied by vague threats of legal action if I refused. I took the letter straight to Richard Cole, my lawyer, who had handled family disputes with a careful hand for years. He read the letter once, then twice, a slow, deliberate analysis that made me feel like every word of my parents' bluff was being dissected. They don't have a case, he said finally, leaning back in his chair. But they're escalating. We'll respond officially. 2 days later, Richard sent a formal letter. Every line measured, every word precise. All communication had to go through him. Any attempt at harassment, coercion, or interference with my housing or career would be documented. After that, the calls stopped. Total silence. Not mine, theirs. The difference was palpable. A week later, my phone rang. Aunt Veronica. Her voice was cautious, almost conspiratorial. They're losing it, she whispered. Your mother is furious. Your father, I don't know. Embarrassed, confused, both. I didn't respond immediately. My aunt continued quietly. They hired a nanny, someone full-time, paid. They're finally facing the consequences of pushing too far. I didn't gloat. But there was a subtle satisfaction in knowing the responsibility they had tried to dump on me was now theirs to carry. They were learning what it meant to meet their own demands with real effort and real cost. The first weekend alone in my apartment was surreal. No knock at the door, no frantic phone calls, just quiet and light. I unpacked slowly, rearranging furniture with intention, each movement a reclamation of my life. Each book placed on the shelf, each dish stored, felt like a small act of defiance, a tangible proof that my choices mattered. Then came the mediation request. My parents had engaged a lawyer and requested a formal session. Part of me bristled. Why involve another layer of procedure after everything I had done? But another part of me recognized the opportunity, a chance to ensure boundaries were acknowledged and respected, a record in ink that couldn't be disputed later. On a cold November morning, I arrived at the mediation center near downtown, dressed deliberately in a dark navy suit, hair pulled back, hands calm. Richard walked beside me, his presence a steady anchor. Inside, my parents sat on one side of a long, polished table. Their lawyer, Patricia Winters, was poised, professional, ready to defend them. My mother's face was pale, my father's jaw tense. Neither met my eyes. The mediator, an older man named Donald Hughes, set the ground rules. No interruptions, respectful language, equal time for each party. My father was first to speak. "We're here because our family has experienced a misunderstanding." His tone was defensive, trying to frame the situation as trivial. I fought down the laugh rising in my throat. "Misunderstanding?" I repeated quietly but firmly. My mother softened her tone. "We simply asked Chloe to help Serena during a difficult time. We didn't expect her to flee." I inhaled sharply. Flee? Even though I followed every legal term of my lease and moved to a new apartment, I asked, voice steady. Even though I ensured my actions were lawful and documented? My father's voice rose slightly. "Affordable housing, reasonable contribution." "In return, I cut ties with coercion," I replied, calm but unwavering. I used no threats, no manipulation, no pressure. I only acted to protect my own rights and sanity. Patricia shifted forward. "My clients regret how the conversation came across," she said, carefully measured. "No," I interrupted. "Let's not rewrite history." They said the words, "Raise your rent unless you help." Calmly, proudly, reasonably. I do not owe anyone reinterpretation. Those were their words, their intent. My mother's shoulders tensed. "We just wanted you home," she said, voice cracking, almost pleading. "This wasn't about home," I said softly. "It was about control." Donald interjected, mediating gently. "Let's focus on resolution." The session continued, an exhausting but necessary battle of truth. My parents wavered between defensiveness, justification, and reluctant acknowledgement. 30 minutes later, they finally agreed to respect boundaries. No financial leverage, no pressure for childcare, no interference in housing or career. Patricia drafted a memorandum. Legally non-binding, yes, but in black and white. A line drawn, clear and undeniable. As we gathered our things, my mother finally looked at me. Really looked. Her voice broke. "I didn't realize you felt trapped." "You didn't need to realize," I said. "I've told you in countless ways over the years. You just didn't listen." My father asked quietly, "So what happens now?" I took a deliberate breath. "You face the consequences of the chaos you created. I live my life." Richard guided me toward the door. The hallway outside was calm, but my heartbeat had steadied. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control, clarity, freedom. Not vengeance, not triumph. Reclamation. The first morning in my apartment after mediation was surreal. The sunlight illuminated my carefully chosen space, highlighting the small acts of independence I had achieved. For the first time, my shoulders weren't tense. Work resumed its rhythm. Without the emotional tug-of-war draining me, my focus sharpened, my energy returned. My manager noticed. "You seem lighter," she remarked. I laughed quietly, understanding at last the weight I had been carrying for years. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of my family's ultimatum unfolded. Serena hired a full-time nanny, someone trained, someone fairly compensated. My parents contributed financially, a monthly reminder that manipulation has tangible costs. I didn't relish their struggle, but it was a quiet satisfaction to see consequences land where they belonged. When I finally met Serena for coffee, the dynamic was different. No pleading, no desperation. Just two sisters rebuilding a relationship on honest terms. I didn't volunteer to babysit. She didn't ask. And that alone spoke volumes. Weeks later, a neutral dinner with my parents felt possible. Awkward at first, careful, tentative. But for the first time, it was civil. They asked about my apartment, my work, my routines. I answered confidently, aware of my own worth. Our relationship wasn't healed, perhaps never fully, but it was no longer built on coercion. That was enough. Looking back, leaving wasn't rebellion. It was survival. Boundaries didn't destroy my family. They revealed what was already fragile and allowed a reconstruction of honesty. I learned that love without respect is just control disguised as care, and no one should live under that weight. The quiet in my new apartment gradually became comforting. I had the freedom to make decisions without interference, to live on my own terms. Mornings began with sunlight spilling across the exposed brick. The aroma of coffee and no expectation other than my own. The space was mine to fill, to shape, to breathe in. Each morning I sat in my reading chair, coffee in hand, reflecting on how long I had endured compromises disguised as family obligations. Work regained its rhythm. Without the constant tug of my family's demands, I was more focused, more present. Projects moved faster, my mind clearer. My manager noticed. "You seem lighter," she said, and I laughed, realizing how much weight I had been carrying for years. For the first time, I could breathe without guilt. The effects of my departure were immediate at home. Serena's exhaustion was visible even from a distance. She had hired a nanny, someone trained and reliable, and my parents were contributing financially. Aunt Veronica updated me discreetly. "It's enlightening for them," she said. "They're realizing the reality they tried to avoid by pressuring you. Every day they see the cost of trying to control life that wasn't theirs to manage." I didn't revel in their struggle. I simply recognized that actions have consequences and manipulation has a price. For me, the real victory was the calm, the ability to live without fear of guilt, coercion, or obligation. 2 weeks after mediation, I finally met Serena in a quiet cafe. I expected tension, but what unfolded was different. No pleading, no desperation, just two sisters navigating a new dynamic. Conversation flowed freely about her children, her job, and the small victories in her own life. I didn't offer to babysit. She didn't ask. For the first time, our relationship felt like choice rather than expectation. Dinner with my parents came weeks later. Neutral territory, neutral restaurant. Initially awkward, careful, tentative. They asked about my apartment, my routine, my work. I answered calmly, confident in my decisions. The conversation was civil, cautious. But there was something fragile in their acknowledgement of boundaries. They hadn't changed entirely. They never would. But they had learned the limits of coercion. The realization that they couldn't control me and that I wasn't willing to bend was a subtle but permanent shift. Freedom was more than physical space. It was mental clarity. It was the knowledge that my decisions, my life, my time were my own. I could prioritize work, friendships, hobbies, even quiet solitude without guilt. I could choose to help when I wanted, not because someone threatened my livelihood or manipulated my sense of duty. Life slowly regained rhythm. I painted a small mural on one exposed wall, something abstract and vibrant, a declaration that the apartment wasn't just a shelter. It was mine, a reflection of choice. I spent evenings reading, cooking meals I enjoyed, playing music without interruption. Even mundane tasks felt lighter without the looming expectation that every action was evaluated against family needs. Through it all, I realized something crucial. Independence isn't just about moving out or paying your own bills. It's about establishing and maintaining boundaries, about making decisions that honor your life and well-being. It's about refusing coercion in any form, even when it comes cloaked as love, as family, as tradition. One chilly Saturday, while unpacking a box of books, I noticed a photograph tucked in between pages. It was from my last birthday spent at my parents' house, a family photo with forced smiles, each of us slightly misaligned, edges of tension visible in posture and expression. I smiled faintly. I had changed the narrative. I had stepped out of that picture and created a new one where my presence was chosen, not demanded. Even with this freedom, the emotional landscape was complex. I wasn't entirely free from the ripple effects of my actions. Calls and messages occasionally slipped through, Aunt Veronica keeping me informed, friends checking in. But I learned to filter, to prioritize, to let consequence exist without guilt. I didn't need to fix everyone else's chaos. I only needed to maintain my life and my peace. Months passed, and my apartment became a haven. My neighbors knew me as quiet, polite, professional. At work, my focus sharpened. I took on new responsibilities, led small projects, and discovered talents I had buried under years of compromise. Each accomplishment was quieter than the victories of conflict, but no less satisfying. Eventually, I met Serena again. This time, conversation didn't even brush the past. Her kids were vibrant, happy under the care of a professional. We laughed about everyday things, shared updates on life and work. There was no tension, no guilt, no obligation. It was refreshing, human, sisterly in a way I hadn't felt before. We were rebuilding trust on honest terms, not debt or coercion. Even my parents' behavior shifted subtly. They remained traditional, often intrusive in thought, but boundaries were respected. No financial leverage, no unsolicited advice on my living situation, no pressure disguised as family duty. Each interaction was a reminder that respect is an action, not a sentiment. They hadn't fully changed, they never might, but their recognition of my autonomy allowed a relationship that didn't suffocate. I reflected often on what I had learned. Disappearing wasn't rebellion. It was survival. Choosing oneself doesn't fracture family. It illuminates cracks already present and allows space for honesty, for rebuilding on truthful foundations. Respect cannot be assumed. It must be demanded and maintained. And love without respect is control in disguise. Late one evening, I sat in my reading chair, city lights gleaming through the window, coffee steaming beside me. Silence no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. It felt like freedom, solid, steady, mine. I knew my story wasn't extraordinary in the grand scheme, but it was mine. And in claiming it, I had finally understood the value of boundaries, the strength of independence, and the quiet power of choosing oneself. If anyone reads this and feels trapped, manipulated, cornered by those who should protect, remember this. Stepping away isn't betrayal. It's clarity. It's necessary. It's survival. And the life you reclaim, piece by piece, is a testament to your courage, resilience, and self-respect.